Before we begin, I would like to acknowledge that the Center for Student Involvement and Careers and UBC's Vancouver Point Grey campus are situated on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Musqueam people. Today, you may be joining us from many places with many different histories, and you can learn more about the traditional owners of those lands at native-land.ca. We'll share that link in the chat with you as well. You should also be able to see a QR code and a link on your screen, and also a link in the chat. This just lets us know who's here, and you're able to sign into the event through the QR code and through the link. And again, you should be able to see that in the chat and on your screen shortly. My name is Amir Hariri. I'm an employer and alumni engagement advisor with the Center for Student Involvement and Careers, and I'll be your moderator today. Whilst in our event space, I would like to remind everyone that all members of our UBC community are expected to uphold a respectful environment in which civility, diversity, opportunity, and inclusion are valued. For those of you who may not know, the CSINC is home to UBC's Central Career Office and a resource for all UBC students. At the CSINC, you will find our Work Learn program, our career development coaches, virtual workshops and online resources, as well as the employer and alumni team who create opportunities to engage with employers and professionals through career fairs, employer info sessions, and our careers online job board. You can come and visit us in person at Brock Hall or through your account on Careers Online to learn more about our services. All participants are muted for the duration of the event. Feel free to turn on your cameras. It's always nice to see faces as we go through Zoom events, so please do that. We'll go through a Q&A portion in the second half of today's office hour. Some of you have already sent us your questions, and I'll make sure to get to those throughout the Q&A. You're also welcome to either send questions in Zoom chat or raise your hand and I'll tag you so you can unmute and ask your questions from Shirley live. Please keep your questions short and concise, as it will give us an opportunity to answer more of the questions. And now I'm happy to introduce today's speaker. Shirley was born and raised in Vancouver and is a dedicated and inclusive sales leader with 18 years of experience in business development, strategic planning, and category management within the CPG industry. Her career evolution with Danone over the past 2 decades has been an enriching journey of both personal and professional growth. With a love for the West Coast, Shirley has been able to carve out a successful career working remotely while delivering breakthrough results and best-in-class business practices. She has taken on multiple roles that have contributed to exponential revenue growth and doubling of Danone's market share in the West during her tenure. As one of Canada's top 100 employers and largest consumer-facing B corporations, Shirley feels fortunate to have found a company like Danone to grow alongside. Finding alignment with her career aspirations and personal values is what keeps her motivated and inspired every day. I'll now give the floor to Shirley. Thank you for being here with us today.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me. My name is Shirley Chan. Welcome. And thanks to Amir and UBC again for having me on this forum. And to all of you for choosing to spend the next hour and a half of your time with me too. So hopefully there's a little something for everyone to take away from today's event. I don't have a big presentation or deck necessarily to share today. So really my goal was to simply share my story and any kind of learnings of, how I've been able to kind of grow and develop a career, within the same organization, again, for the past 18, 19 years and going. It's perhaps, the road less traveled, but, there's many routes to kind of get to the same destination. So perhaps it's, might just generate some ideas for you on how you can continue to evolve, your career path, either with your current company or future company. So I'm just going to share my screen so that just gives us some visuals to kind of follow along. So let's see if I can do this. Okay, do you all see my screen?
Yes.
Yes, okay, perfect. Okay, so maybe just a little bit about myself to start. See if slides. So yeah, those are kind of the goals for today. So a little bit about myself, which again, you kind of already heard from Mir, but born and raised in Vancouver. My husband of 10 years and I have a schnoodle, Henry. He's our furry firstborn. He's a half schnauzer, half half poodle. He's definitely, our little baby. Emma, our 7-year-old, and Brandon, our 3-year-old, who all keep us, definitely busy and on our toes. My parents were immigrants from Asia, some first-generation Canadian, who I'm sure many of your parents, share a similar story, came to Canada so that, our siblings and I can have, a brighter future. I'm a UBC alumni, super proud of that. I have an older sister and brother who are also graduates from UBC as well. So it's in the family, different faculties. I made the pragmatic choice and decided to get a degree in commerce. I completed 1 year of pre-com in arts and then got into the commerce faculty in my second year, eventually graduated with a major in marketing. Also completed like the co-op program, which gave me some really great experiences kind of working in the private, public, and kind of nonprofit sectors. And yeah, so it was good, experience just kind of be able to touch different industries before, jumping into the workforce. And when I first decided, I would major in marketing, I guess I envisioned, working for an ad agency or, in product design and marketing. And I didn't necessarily envision a career in traditional sales in sense, in the consumer packaged goods. But being based out of Vancouver, marketing roles, are typically, more limited because most of the head offices are based out east, and sales roles are just, more flexible in where they were located and just more abundant. And that's where I ended up and stayed for most of my career. And to be honest, being a sales leader, it's been a super valuable and transferable life skill set. If you think about it, we're constantly selling, whether we realize it or not, whether it be selling like a physical product to a client, selling an idea to your boss, your parents, kids, negotiating a test score, with their professor. I don't know if that happens, but interviewing for a job. So, we're constantly in sales mode. So today, my role at Danone is, as you said, a sales lead for the West. And my responsibility includes supporting and managing a team of business development managers that, call in a variety of Western-based, grocery retailers. And this event, in retrospect, was actually a really great opportunity for me to kind of reflect back on my career, on, how I got here, why I'm still here, 18 years later with the same company. And maybe first of all, for those of you who aren't familiar, with Danone. It's a food and beverage company based out of Boucherville, Quebec. We also have a head office in Toronto as well, with a very health-focused portfolio. So some brands you might recognize, like Activia, Oikos, Silk, Evian. So, what really attracted me, I think, to Danone was, but more of its mission of, bringing health through food to as many people as possible. I thought that was, really unique when I was kind of doing, my research behind, the company. So kind of, I think it's important to kind of see, a little bit of that context because that kind of explains maybe why, I decided to stay as long as I did. But maybe even just stepping back a little bit and to understand, again, a little bit of why I stayed as long as I did. At the core, I think we need to, also evaluate, what does everyone want, out of an ideal career? One offers like financial stability, of course, but also growth opportunity, right? And, positive, inclusive, balanced work environment. I think that's also grown in importance over time, especially, through the pandemic we just went through and are still kind of just coming out of. It's shifted, I think a lot of our mindsets about, where we want to invest our time. And it's just kind of made us kind of take a closer look at what really matters to us. And I feel like the main reason why I've stayed so long is as I've evolved through kind of my life stages, Danone has kind of been able to evolve with me and support, my changing needs and my changing priorities, along the way. In the beginning, of my career, I was in my early 20s, fresh out of university, had a student loan debt, still living with my parents, no car. So, my ambition was really to gain that financial independence, pay off my student loans, gain new experiences. Danone offered me a car, took care of all my gas and expenses, and got to travel around the world on like work trips. We hosted, VIP clients, to sporting events and concerts. So it was a great introduction for me. It was really fun, into the workforce, at that life stage. But then as I got married and I grew my family, I start to value more of a work-life balance, right? Because, we don't, have an office here. So, I work fully remotely, which actually offers me a lot of flexibility with things like school drop-offs and pickups. But in a way though, working remotely can also limit sometimes, the amount of opportunities that are available to you, because, a lot of the roles are based out of, an office, and they typically like, to have, those roles kept, in an office setting. But that's changing too now with, hybrid schedules and us going through basically 2-3 years of working remotely. I think they're more flexible when it comes to that as well. But Danone, over my tenure with them, has been very supportive, of my desire to stay in Vancouver, to stay close to my family who are all here. And, I've been lucky in my career to kind of have very supportive managers also along the way, because, you can't do it alone. You need to have, champions and allies, for your career and your career progression. So that's been, a blessing for me, which is why it's important to also, network, and just be kind in how you conduct yourself with others. And I think that goes a long way. But to Danone's credit, they really recognize, like, the changing priorities and needs, of their employees today. In recent years, like, as an example, they implemented like a flex work policy, where you get half-day Fridays in the summer and then unlimited vacation days. So that's pretty rare. And, so provided, of course, you get your work done, right? But that's really great. You don't have to worry about, how many holidays you're taking, trying to save them. It's just, there's a balance, right? And I guess that's where I saw the biggest differentiation, with Danone versus, other prospects that were out there when I got approached, to leave. So for me, it was about that, that culture, and the people, and also the purpose also behind the work too. I don't know how many of you are actually aware, but 2 years ago, Danone became the largest B Corp certified company in Canada. So it's a certification, but it's a movement as well. So it's basically using business as a force for good. Essentially kind of linking your corporate growth objectives with social well-being. So we basically link all social and environmental kind of impact into all aspects of our decision making, from what products we want to launch, where we source our ingredients, how we transport them, who we want to partner with. So all those things kind of paint the picture of kind of why I think I stayed so long when I retrospectively kind of think back and look back. But another is also the growth opportunity, right? I think that's what you need to look for in an organization, especially one that you want to carve out a career with for the long term. So what has my journey been like with Danone? I'll say that today, the Danone today that I work for is a much different company from the one that I started with. I've been through, I think, 5 senior leadership changes, which, by default usually comes with major reorganizations and layoffs, a company acquisition and a merger, basically 9 direct manager changes, 7 different role changes across 2 different functions. So, despite me being with one company for that long, I've had to adapt a lot also, as if I've moved companies in a way, because as you work with new people, new leadership teams, who don't know you, you have to prove yourself, in a way all over again. So after I finished my undergrad, I got right to work applying for jobs. Came across Danone, who I'd never heard of before, probably because they're more of a French-based company and more developed in Europe and in Eastern Canada at the time. They're still kind of building up their presence, Western Canada, but I saw potential with them. And it was really also the people who kind of won me over as well, like in my interview process. I think we think it's all just about them asking us questions, but it's them also having to sell their company to you too, if they want to recruit a good employee. So kind of keep that in the back of your mind as well. So I started off my journey with them as what we call a retail development specialist. So I know it's a mouthful, which would be our entry-level sales position. And I oversaw, half of the BC region. So essentially sort of like a territory rep or a manager type role. My main responsibility was to check in on the stores that carried our products, ensure that they were executing our promotional plans properly, carrying all the right products, helping with merchandising and basically just managing, that relationship with the stores. And it was only a small team of 4 or 5, for the entire Western region. So we worked, with a lot of brokers and stuff, and the team's now evolved to about like 15 or so. And at the time we were one category company. We now oversee 5 different categories, and we're the market leaders in most of them. So in the beginning, it was a small team and we had to wear lots of hats, right? Like I was literally scrubbing down shelves and like merchandising sets with the dairy managers in stores at like, midnight, building presentation decks, to present to the store managers. But, it helped me learn a lot very quickly about the business and about myself. I had to learn, how to navigate advising and directing people that were often twice my age and mostly men. And this industry, has changed a lot. But when I first started, it was, it could be a bit of an old school, like boys club almost sometimes. So it took, and some took issue, taking direction from, a baby faced 23-year-old, and I wasn't always heard or taken seriously. And as more of an introvert, I would say I am, and often the only like minority in the room too, I really had to kind of build up my confidence and like speak for myself and build that trust and relationship with my customers as well. So yeah, I grew some thick skin pretty quickly, and it was, about not necessarily, it was stepping out of my comfort zone, but also learning to kind of expand my comfort zone as well. So that was a very important part of my growth, was within my early years with the company as well. A little bit of trial by fire, I would say. So after doing that for a couple of years, I was promoted to Western sales analyst, which sounded really boring and dry to me at first. But, our business was growing, the needs of our team were growing, and, they needed support in a different way, and I would get a raise. So I obliged. And this was, where I picked up, kind of a lot of my technical and kind of analytical skill sets. Math wasn't my favorite subject, but what I learned was that this role was less about number crunching and data entry, and there was that, of course, but that it was more about fact-based story building and storytelling. So basically translating boring sales analytics and presenting them as business opportunities, right, for our sales team, for the customer. And acquiring that skill, really set me up for success, in my next role as a business development manager or a key account manager. And I stayed in this role for quite some time, moving through, various accounts and, managing the head office relationship. And then I went on my first mat leave with Emma, and I came back actually as a category manager on the insights team. And the reason I was considered for this role was because of, I think, my prior exposure to category management in my early roles in sales. Again, like the team was very small and you had to just kind of learn as you go. If there was a need, you had to just figure it out and do it yourself. But that was the kind of that self-sufficiency and self-teaching, I think, gave me a leg up on, what this role required, and showed, Danone that I could handle this job. And, I learned a lot in this role. It was about, looking at macro trends, shopper behavior. And even though I was no longer in sales, I was still, again, selling, calling on the same customers, basically, but from the lens of, how can we grow your category rather than just Danone? And that actually helped build my credibility, actually, even more, in my relationship with customers, even more too. So that was that role at the time. And then after coming back from my most recent maternity leave, I found my way back into sales, into the sales function in my current role as sales lead. And it just, again, allowed me to develop my, my leadership skills, my managerial skills, and kind of flex my strategic thinking muscles as well. Managing people, I would say, is one of the hardest jobs to do well, because there's no one best way to do it, because you're dealing with different personalities, different changing team dynamics as well. But again, calling on hundreds of different store managers as a rep, I had to be adaptable. So that was definitely something, again, that helped me, in my early career, that set me up for success, in my current role now. And it's super rewarding, and probably the best part of the job I enjoy most is seeing my team grow and succeed. So yeah, so that's been basically my career path. And it probably doesn't actually sound all that unconventional, other than the fact that I've done it with the same company, because you could have easily taken that same path, but kind of done it with different companies along the way. I've taken some lateral moves as a BDM, branched out into like a different department, took on some extra responsibilities, not all of which were necessarily by choice or preference, but, all to gain, a broader view of the business, to meet new people and to pick up, new skill sets that kind of just help round you out, round out your experiences and your competencies. So I guess, if I had any advice to give, it would be to, stay open. Even if the role doesn't have like a sexy title or the job description seems dull at first, you just never know what you could learn from it and who you might get to work with in the process and get exposed to, and that maybe you might just enjoy it more than you think, right? So I've always given everything at least my best effort and made sure that, no matter what the role was, however much I liked or disliked it, that, I took away something from every role, whatever that might be. And timing is also everything too, right? So just as I thought things were getting a little bit stale, like, for me in my career, just kind of, again, doing the same thing and, selling the same products, Danone acquired a company called White Wave in 2019, which made silk and a number of plant-based foods and beverages, which is, the trend now. So it opened up even more opportunities for me to grow and evolve within the company as well. So that honestly kind of continues to be my career compass, is just to stay challenged and not necessarily to chase titles, but to really, gather new experiences, and that may be something that you might want to think about is, what's that next experience that I want versus like that next role, and just meet a lot of great people along the way. And that's maybe something, again, to ask yourself. And when you're kind of at those crossroads, kind of deciding what you want to take as the next step, and that can be done with one company or by moving around, as long as you stay open. And I think another great takeaway, I've realized in my career is just to be yourself, and invest in relationships. Be nice to people, who you work with, and for also those that you don't, because you may one day, and as I've evolved in my career within Danone, staying in the same industry as well, so have, my direct counterparts and contacts on like the retailer side as well. And those relationships and that history goes a long way. They say, like, if they like you, they'll take a meeting with you, which, isn't always easy to get. But if they trust you, they'll do business with you. And that definitely rings true. And in the CPG industry, you'll notice that most people, once they're in, they don't really leave. We just kind of get shuffled around, with the exception of me. So just be kind, treat people with respect and integrity, and that always breeds dividends. So, sometimes we also forget, that the people who we indirectly work with can also have a say in whether you should be considered for that next promotion. As an example, like two of my peers, at one point, they ended up being my boss, one of which is a VP now at Danone and has recommended me for multiple promotions along the way, right? So kind of keeping that bigger picture in mind, it also helps too. So just to summarize, working for a company that I feel, is front-footed, forward-thinking, that values its people, is kind of what inspires me to kind of keep coming back to work every day. And I'm fully aware we're just selling food, not curing cancer, not a doctor, not changing lives in a big way, but I'm putting my time into an organization, and if I'm going to put my time into an organization, I want to do it to one that, can make a difference and allows me to also at the same time constantly evolve and grow myself, into a better leader as well. Then in that case, I feel pretty good, about kind of my unconventional choice, I guess, of sticking around all those years. So that's my story. And hopefully you guys found some nuggets of information from there, from my journey. But I'd be happy to take any questions if anybody has any at this time that, I haven't been able to answer.
Thank you so much for the presentation. I think we were chatting before starting the event, but it's one of those things where you keep hearing about the changes in the labor market and how there's no way to continue to work for the same company and grow, and those days are done. And I think it's nice and it's important to talk about the opportunities that exist, because as you mentioned, the career path in terms of job titles kind of looks the same as if you were moving company to company. It's just happening in the same place. So, that was great. Thank you for the presentation. So we're in the Q&A now. I'm just going to ask everyone, if you feel comfortable, turn on your cameras. It's nice to see faces virtually, and then we can get going with the questions. A lot has been sent in advance, so I'm happy to get started with that, but we would love to hear from you and your questions now. So if you have any questions, I see ones in the chat already, so I'll ask that. But if you have any other questions you would like to ask Shirley, just raise your hand and I'll tag you, and you can just, unmute yourself and ask a question. Maybe just to get us started, I'll just read the one that's in the chat, Shirley, and then we can just go from there. So question here is, hi Shirley, thank you for being so open and honest with us about your career journey. Do you have any regrets or things you wish you should do more when you were dealing with being an introvert and a minority in your earlier role?
I don't think there's anything I would regret that I did or didn't do. I think you just, gather more confidence, the more times you are put in uncomfortable situations and you kind of learn how to deal with it. And each time, you gain more learnings out of it, and how you would, you learn and you grow, from situations. So I think, you have to kind of go through some rough patches in order to kind of, get to the other side. So I wouldn't say there's anything I would have changed or that I would regret necessarily, but there's all sorts of people, that you deal with, introverts and extroverts. Everybody thinks, just because you're in sales, you're always dealing with, extroverts and like loud people and stuff. But, it's actually a good mix of us, there. I can turn it on, if I want to, but I'm very private as a person. I like my own space and my downtime. So I think it's just kind of, again, expanding kind of your comfort zone and kind of putting yourself in those, maybe uncomfortable situations that you're not typically in, and just trying to stretch it out.
Well, that's great. And I think maybe just to follow that up, how do you go about with networking, especially, and building those connections? You talked about relationships. As someone who's naturally not an extrovert, where do you find, whether it's practicing the skills to network or just really, promoting yourself and building those relationships, what has helped you throughout the years in doing that?
Yeah, I think, I wouldn't say like just because I label myself as an introvert like that, I can't and don't like I don't like social situations or they make me uncomfortable. I think everyone has it in them. It's just you have to kind of just learn to turn on, and it just takes more effort for some people than others. I think the way they define like introvert is just you draw your energy from more like internally versus like extroverts where their energy gainers are from feeding off of like other people's energy, so that really kind of gets them going. So I think it's about understanding the difference there, and that it's in you. Is just it takes practice sometimes as well, and then obviously comes the confidence that comes with just being more comfortable with the unfamiliar.
That's great advice. I know there was a piece that you touched on where you talked about the changing scene of Danone, but also I think that's fair for a lot of other corporations with having more diverse voices in the room. And I know it was mentioned in the question that was typed in. So I'm curious, I guess maybe if you can touch on that a little bit more in terms of like what you had to do to get yourself heard when you were starting and how you've seen that change over time. That would be great.
I think that's a great question, and I think that's still something maybe as a work in progress for me actually, because I am in terms of like that self-promotion, I tend to let my work speak on my behalf, like that's just me personally. But sometimes you kind of have to like toot your own horn a little bit, and and put yourself out there. And luckily enough, like, I've had really great managers along the way that really helped, put my name out there and, spoke about my wins and my successes in those forums that I weren't a part of, so that other people did know about me, and that my name was out there. So again, I don't think you can get to do it on your own. So that's why networking and establishing those connections, inside and outside of the organization really help, because they can vouch for you in situations maybe where you're not present, and they can speak on behalf of, all the good things that you're doing as well.
That's great. I'll just jump to some of the questions that have come in advance, but again, please raise your hand, ask some questions. This is a good opportunity to get those questions to Shirley. We had a question before. Hi, Shirley. I would like to know if you knew what you wanted to do from the start. If yes, what made you so certain? If no, how did you decide on when to shift your focus?
Yeah, so no, I didn't know what I wanted to always do from the start. So like I said, it was a little bit of like trial by fire, and I think just the more experiences you have and the more people you talk to, and it's good to kind of get a good diverse, sample of people to talk to as well in different industries and different roles. The more you'll kind of figure out what feels right for you and what's a good fit for you, and what might be right for you now may not be right for you, years down the road, as again your needs and your priorities change too. So yeah, and maybe just not to put so much pressure on yourself as well to kind of have all the answers right away. I think you kind of will figure it out, as you go along, and things will automatically kind of just fall into place, and you'll know what's right for you.
So building on that, and thank you for that. Do you have any advice for someone with multiple interests and maybe unsure about the path that they want to focus on?
Yeah, and kind of like along the same lines. Well, if you have multiple interests, that's great, right? If you have lots of different areas that you want to expand on, just start somewhere. Don't get bogged down by whether it's the right path, right away, because there's many ways of getting to the same destination, right? So just pick a path, and be committed to it, and just make sure you're always getting something out of it, regardless of whatever role it is that you're going into or whatever that experience is, and be committed and just do it well. It would be my advice.
Talking a little bit about skills, there's a couple of questions that came in through that, but one of them is asking, what skills did you develop early on in your career or maybe during undergrad that have helped you today? And is there anything you wish you had learned additionally while you were at UBC or in your undergrad?
I think one of the most important skill sets is, interpersonal skills and like communication. We're always dealing with people, right? No matter what the role is. So learning to relate and work with others, whether it's a group project or, it's in a work setting, it's always an invaluable skill. So I think, recognizing your own maybe unconscious like biases and how you work and how you project yourself, and just always conducting yourself in a way that's kind and with integrity, I think is always is huge.
So would you say, okay, building on that, one of the questions was maybe what are the top 3 skills that you need to succeed in a business development role or in like a sales role? So what would you say if you had to name 3 top skills that you've seen work for yourself and others?
Yeah, so again, especially in a business development role, or when you're in sales, again, a lot of the times you're dealing with people, so it's about building connections and relationships. So I think a lot of like the hard skills can be like the technical skills. They can always be learned and they can be honed, right? If you feel like there's some gaps in your competency there. But I think what sets a good business development manager from a great one is those soft skills, is those interpersonal skills and your ability, again, to work well with others, to work as a team, to be a team player. So I would say that's definitely one of them for sure. And then grit as well is something you probably hear a lot as well. It's just, especially in sales, you'll definitely hear way more no's than yeses, before you get that yes. So it's about, being just persistent and kind of not giving up and kind of seeing things through, I think is definitely another huge skill and that you look for, in especially for somebody in this type of a role. And just, be curious, just constantly learn and, be open to learning, new skill sets, or just, putting again yourself in situations where, you familiarize yourself with the unfamiliar. I think that that's always great, is just to keep an open mind and just be curious and constantly learn.
Well, that's great. And I like that you keep going back to that kindness piece and making sure that you're putting your best foot forward, or building those relationships in a good way, because like you said, you just don't, first of all, it's just a good thing to do as a person, but also you just don't know who you come across later on in your career. So I really like that as a focus in building relationships. One of the questions is about daily habits. So what daily habits or actions do you curate in your personal life that you think contribute positively to your professional life and in maintaining balance?
Yeah, that's important for sure, is maintaining that balance. I think sometimes, especially early on in your career, like, when there is that learning curve, like maybe that balance might be a little bit off. But for me, one thing I try to do, and still, again, always work in progress, is just to be present with whatever it is that I'm doing. So if I'm working, then I'm in a meeting, then that's what I'm focused in on, and I'm all ears and paying attention. And when I'm at home and with my kids, then I do my best to kind of not be thinking about work, right? And really just enjoy that moment and that time, and to make time for like the things that you love, right? And that that again just give you energy, and sometimes it's hard to do it when you don't schedule it into a calendar. Like I literally sometimes have to schedule in like a lunch break into my calendar, because if someone sees an opening in my calendar, and it might be from the east, so they don't realize that it's actually noon my time, like they'll book me in. So it's actually literally just carving out like spaces for you to think, to just kind of decompress and just have some time to yourself. That I find really helps to have that discipline of doing that.
So I'll ask you this, because you've been working remotely before any of us got into this sort of hybrid remote training.
Yeah, exactly.
So I'm curious, what has balancing work-life balance been like doing remote work for such a long time? Because one of the things I noticed, and I've heard from a lot of people, is that things can just start to sort of blend together. The hours change and you're just not sure what's a work hour, what's not. So how have you been able to balance that, and what was that process like for you?
Yeah, it's again still a work in progress, especially anytime I start a new role, right? Like again, there's that learning curve where you want to do well, and you're investing probably more hours in a day just to make sure you're up to speed. But yeah, it's learning, I guess, kind of when to just shut off and like close the door. But it's hard, it definitely is, even still. But the fact that I have kids now, I think actually has helped me with that more, because like literally like 3 o'clock, they're out of school. I need to just stop and like work, stop work and just go grab them. But I think it's about like flexibility as well, and kind of aligning with your manager on kind of what your work schedule is like, what works for you in order for you to maintain balance. So for me, like between like say 8 to 9, that's when I'm getting my kids ready, like they just know that maybe that's a block of time that Shirley's not available. And then same thing between like 2:30 to 3:30, but then I'm back online like at like 7 o'clock at night, and I'm finishing up my emails, and I'm like sending off those responses that I never got to. So that's just kind of what works for me. And it's just about setting a clear plan with your managers, so that you have an understanding of how you guys can kind of blend your two kind of work schedules together to make it work.
Back to that communication piece, how important it is to have that relationship and communication. A question I thought was interesting that came in was about leadership. What is the most important thing you've learned about leadership? And this could be you as a leader, or that you've seen from someone in a leadership role.
I think what makes a great leader, and just by, again, being exposed to great leaders and people that have been great managers to me, is just taking care of your team. So it's like being leaders, sometimes you think, oh, you have to be the first one to speak, you're in charge, or you're kind of driving the agenda, but it's really about, I think, taking care of your team and being there to support your team. I think that's what really makes, sets apart, a good leader from, again, a great leader, and opening opportunities for other people as well, as a leader. So you're in that position of influence, where you have that ability to take, to basically take people with you, as you grow within the organization. And that's, again, what I feel like I get the most satisfaction out of, being like a people leader and a people manager, is seeing, my team succeed, and evolve within their career, and being able to kind of open up those opportunities and doors for them, as people have done for myself as well. So kind of paying that forward, I think, that's a huge quality, and in great leaders, that, and just in seeing, and being a part of a lot of these type of forums and listening to a lot of different speakers, like that's a very common, thing that I've recognized, that also they value as something that gives them the most satisfaction, throughout their careers.
Oh, that's a great point. Again, I'll ask if anyone in the room has questions. Don't be afraid to raise your hand and jump on the mic and ask it. We have a lot of questions to go through, so that's not a problem, but we want to hear from you in the room. I'll keep going for now. One of the questions is about assessing risk versus rewards, maybe the different options that are available to you throughout your career path. So the question is, how do you assess risk versus rewards, especially when it comes to your career decision making?
I think that's a very personal question. It really depends on, what your priorities are, what your values are. If you value, say, like you have, again, like me, a young family, and I value time, and I value flexibility, in my work schedule. Like if, there's another, employer that offered me more money, but then, I'd be working like, 15 hours a day, like then that's a risk for me that I wouldn't probably be willing to take. So I think it depends, so it's just for you, I guess, to understand what your priorities are, and then for you to kind of make that call.
One of the questions is asking about, you touched on this a little bit, but it's about maintaining interest in your work long term. So the question is, what have you done, or what do you do on an ongoing basis to maintain interest in working within the same organization? You touched on this a little bit when you said, the purchase of silk and the nature of the job changed a little bit, but maybe if you can, build on that a little bit more.
Yeah, I mean, we have like, and this is probably pretty common across, any organization and industry, is at least like once or twice, or maybe once a quarter, or once or twice a year at least, like you'll have those development conversations, with your manager. Again, go back to the communication piece, is to share, be open and share about, what is it that you're looking for, as your next step in your next role, and to work out a very detailed plan with your manager on how you can get that and how you can get there. And just to be transparent, about, what is it that, is your energy drainers and gainers in your day-to-day, job, and how you can maybe try to increase more of the energy gainer portion of it, and what projects they can bring you into that will help kind of fuel that part of what you're looking for. So yeah, I think it all comes down to just voicing what it is that you want, and hopefully you have a supportive manager that is able to kind of help you build a plan, so that you can get to where you want to be.
Oh, that's great. One of the questions is about the industry itself. So what do you enjoy most about working in your industry? And I guess the industry could be the industry that Danone is in versus your role in a sort of business development sales role. So what is it that you enjoy most about either, I guess?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of great people in like the CBG industry, like, super diverse, great mix. And I think that's probably what I enjoy most is like working with people who come from different walks of life and have different, years and ranges of experience, I think that's always, and there's so many kind of like industry, like networking events and, golf tournaments that, your retailers will put on that you kind of get to take part of. And yeah, it's just kind of like, yeah, just meeting new people, I think has always been what I think I loved most about it, for sure. And in terms of like the role, like, just being in sales or business development, I'm a super results, driven person. So,
Mm,
I get like a rush out of like closing that deal, or like, that negotiation that went well, or even when it doesn't, like that fuels me even more. So
mm.
that part I really enjoy.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And I guess on the flip side, what would you consider as the toughest challenge you faced within the industry or throughout your career?
The toughest challenge I would say is kind of what I alluded to about, I think, managing people. I think that transition of being like, an individual contributor, as a role where, you're just responsible for what you deliver, you have like full control under, what you do, versus, managing a team, and it's now team goals, team results, and,
Mm,
I take pride in like, how my team performs as well. So when they fail, I feel like a failure too. So it's about kind of, I guess, that transition. I think that probably has been, the biggest challenge is relinquishing a little bit of that control on the day-to-day stuff, and kind of instilling that trust in the team to do, what, you previously were responsible for doing on your own, and to not step in too much, and allow them, the autonomy to kind of figure it out. I think has been an adjustment for me,
mm.
but one that I have enjoyed and that I've learned a ton from. But I would say, yeah, that's probably been my biggest challenge.
Um, Another question here is about, again, talking about networking. Maybe what are some of your suggestions or for some things that have worked for you personally about successful ways to network and then making those connections long lasting? So the example was the tools that you use. So is it LinkedIn or is it virtual in person? Yeah, a little bit of information on networking would be great.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, obviously there's tons of platforms now, like especially virtually, that allows us to kind of establish those quick connects and stuff. And I think, we definitely should take advantage of that for sure. One thing that I find is helpful is, when you meet someone, and whether in person or not at a networking event, maybe reach out to them right away, while that connection is still fresh, versus
Mhm.
like, 10 months down the road, when you really want to kind of start up a conversation and they can't remember who you are. So maybe, yeah, act on those, right away, and establish that connection, and maybe, a conversation. You can just the quick virtual coffee chat, like they're very low commitment, and I think most people would probably be very open to that. And just maybe reach out to people I think, inspire you naturally and that you have commonalities with, because sometimes it's hard to, force genuine connections as well. So kind of, making sure that, this is someone that you have a genuine interest in really trying to get to know, I think will help
Mm.
form that stronger, more genuine bond as well, moving forward. And yeah, maybe, even inquire, with, them, whether they would be open to, mentoring you, I think, that's great. And most people that are leaders, often love to kind of give their time back that way as well. So you never know, if somebody will say yes. So I would say, just give it a try, and and you could, yeah, learn a lot just, just from hearing about others' experiences.
Well, that's very helpful. When this question had come in and you've seen it, so I'm hoping I'm not surprising you with this. The question was about potentially leaving Danone. So the question was, has that opportunity ever come up? Have you ever thought about making a career pivot out of Danone, and why have you basically stayed with Danone?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely, of course. And I've been approached by recruiters before as well, which is, pretty common again in the industry. But the reasons I've stayed is because again, I'm weighing, my risks and benefits based on again what I value, what my priorities are. And ultimately I just felt like, it was still a better fit for me, in Danone. And again, I was still feeling challenged. They were still giving me opportunities. So there was never a reason big enough, I guess, for me to kind of make that leap. I enjoyed like the flexibility of being in that, again, working from home environment. So yeah, so I think that's probably, why I decided to stay.
No, that's fair. One of the questions is about advice to new grads, and basically what advice would you give to new grads who are starting their full-time jobs regarding work-life balance?
Yeah, just again, understand that it's not the balance, will come like that, when you're starting out earlier on in your career, there's going to be a learning curve and you are probably the new person and you're probably trying to prove yourself, right? And then, you just kind of get your name out there. So you might have to work a little bit harder. You might have to work some weekends and some late hours to deliver. But all of that is to kind of, build up, your reputation in the company, right? And in the industry. So maybe in the beginning, that balance might be a little bit off, but that it will come and it will settle as you, again, gain more confidence and familiarity with the role. And then once you get there, then again, to kind of do those specific things, that, help you, carve out time to make sure that, and to set boundaries, I think, that's important again for yourself and for your manager as well. Like when I'm on vacation, like, don't contact me, right? Like that's my time to myself. And sometimes people who don't set those boundaries, like will get the odd, like, text or phone call and stuff. And then they feel like, oh, okay, I can't fully like shut off, and I don't really feel, recharged by the time I come back, so making those expectations clear, I think also help and is absolutely like reasonable as well, right? But sometimes I feel like we can't, we always have to be available, but that's not the case.
No, that's great. The other question here is about mentorship. So what role has mentorship played in your career growth? And maybe if you can give an example of a piece of advice that you've received early in your career, or maybe a little bit further down your career, that has made the most impact for you.
Yeah, like indirectly, not like in terms of like not a formal like mentorship. Like I've had a lot of great managers, like I said, in my career, luckily enough, and just kind of like modeling and then leading by example. Like I've been able to kind of gain a lot about what I want to be as a manager for someone as they were for me. So kind of learning just by their actions. And then I was also in an actual mentorship program within Danone that they have, which was really great. And they actually paired me up with our president of the company.
So that's a good mentor.
Yeah, exactly, right? Like I couldn't have asked probably for a better mentor, but also some pressure there, to also, be prepared, for the conversation and make sure I'm kind of getting the most out of it, and he is as well, right? But that was really great, and again, those are the opportunities that kind of, gave me that exposure, to our most senior leader in the company, and kind of allowed me to, in a very, open environment, just to be myself and be able to kind of ask for career advice or even just, anything, personal advice. And he made me feel super comfortable and was very, just open about, his feedback with me too. So, so that's been great. But I think, the best advice I got was just to be yourself. It sounds cliche, but it is, to just be authentic and that will always, that will never steer you in the wrong direction. So and that I kind of just carried that with me, because sometimes you feel like you have to put on a different face or different personality in different situations, but ultimately if you're true to yourself and you're yourself, that will always be the best approach.
Oh, that's great advice. I'm just going to put this out one more time. We're at our last question, so I want to see if anybody else in the room here has any questions. Please type it in, raise your hand. If not, I'll just ask the last question here. what's the most important takeaway that you would like our audience to leave with today?
The most important takeaway
Yeah.
is to, I guess, in terms of, I guess, career advice, is to not put so much pressure on yourself, I guess, coming out, and just to kind of, figure out what that, and this is, I'm stealing this advice as well because I thought it was so great, is just to figure out what what the next right move is. You don't have to think, 10 steps ahead of like, in 10 years I have to be here. It's good to have that vision, of course, for yourself, but, not to put so much pressure on yourself in terms of, having to do it, within a certain timeline or whatever, and just figure out what the next right move is, not like 10 steps ahead. I think will again, as long as you're making progress and you're always gaining something from whatever experience is your next experience, you'll never lose.
Great. As on that positive note, I feel like you had so much positive advice here in this talk, so that's fantastic. So on that note, I just want to thank you again for hosting this office hour and just sharing your story. And I want to thank everybody else in the room for being here and participating. We're just going to share a little code on the screen in a second. That's just, if you can scan that, it's a survey for us at the end so that we can ask you what you thought about the event and helps us organize future events that you're more interested in. Please continue to visit our UBC calendar and Careers Online. We'll have another office hour basically monthly, so another one next month, more career fairs and info sessions that you can register for. And check out the YouTube page next week. The video will be up in case you're looking for this video or any other office hours that we've done. Thank you again, Shirley, and everyone have a lovely afternoon.
Thank you, everybody. Have a great day. Bye.
Bye-bye.